Socrates is the most quoted philosopher in history. Every sentence attributed to him, every argument, every question, every claim about wisdom and virtue and the examined life was written by someone else, mostly by a man named Plato, who was 28 years younger than him and who worshipped him, which means we don't actually know what Socrates believed. We know what Plato says he believed, and those might not be the same thing. The foundation of Western philosophy is a man we cannot verify, a voice we can only hear through other people's mouths. This is the story of why Socrates never wrote anything down, and what that silence has cost us and given us ever since. Socrates was born in Athens around 470 BCE. His father was a stonemason. His mother, reportedly, was a midwife. He spent most of his life not in lecture halls or academies, but in the streets and markets of Athens, stopping people, asking questions, refusing to leave until something true had emerged. He never charged for his teaching. He claimed to have nothing to teach. What he had was a method. He would find someone who claimed to know something, a politician, a general, a poet, and he would ask them to explain it. And then he would ask one more question, and then another, until the thing they thought they knew collapsed under the weight of their own answers. But his mission didn't start with a book. It started with an enigma. A friend of Socrates travelled to the oracle at Delphi and asked a single question: is there anyone wiser than Socrates? No one is wiser. When Socrates heard this, he wasn't proud. He was terrified. He knew intimately the depth of his own ignorance. To him, the oracle wasn't a compliment. It was a riddle. He set out to prove the gods wrong. He began to question the wise men of Athens, the poets, the politicians, the craftsmen, not to teach them, but to find someone, anyone, who knew more than he did. But at the end of every conversation, the result was the same. They knew nothing, but thought they knew everything. Socrates knew nothing, and knew he knew nothing. The Athenians had a word for it. They called it elenchus. We call it the Socratic method. And it was, by most accounts, deeply annoying. He was accused of being a gadfly, a nuisance, a man who made important people feel stupid in public. In 399 BCE, Athens put him on trial. In Plato's dialogue called Phaedrus, Socrates tells a story. He describes an Egyptian god named Theuth, who invented writing and brought it to the king as a gift. "This will improve the memory of my people," Theuth said. "It is a remedy for forgetting." The king disagreed. "You have invented a reminder, not a remedy for forgetting." A written text cannot answer questions. It cannot defend itself. It says the same thing to every reader, the expert and the ignorant alike, and cannot adapt. It gives you words without understanding. Dialogue for Socrates was the only real technology of truth. You had to be present. You had to push back. You had to feel the moment when your certainty started to crack. Writing, he believed, was a shortcut. And shortcuts in philosophy are how you end up with answers you don't actually understand. Here's where it gets complicated. We have four main sources for what Socrates believed. The Socrates in each account is almost a different person. Plato's Socrates is a profound metaphysician. Xenophon's Socrates is more practical. Aristophanes' Socrates is a fraud. And then there is Aristotle. He never met Socrates, but he tried to strip away the myths. To him, Socrates wasn't a dreamer or a god. He was simply the man who invented inductive reasoning and the search for universal definitions. Scholars have spent centuries trying to work out which one is accurate. They call it the Socratic Problem, and they haven't solved it, because Socrates left no words of his own to check against. In 399 BCE, Socrates was charged with 2 crimes: impiety, failing to acknowledge the gods of the city, and corrupting the youth of Athens. He was 70 years old. He conducted his own defense. He was unrepentant. He told the jury that his questioning was a service to Athens, that an unexamined life is not worth living. The jury found him guilty. By a narrow margin, he was sentenced to death. Under Athenian law, a condemned man could propose an alternative penalty. He refused exile. He proposed, sarcastically, that the city should pay him a pension. The jury chose death. He drank hemlock. He died in conversation, surrounded by his students, still asking questions. Here is the paradox at the center of Socrates' choice. By refusing to write, by trusting only dialogue, only the living conversation, he created the most interpreted, most disputed, most quoted philosophical legacy in the history of Western thought. Because he left no text, every generation gets to argue about what he meant. Plato built an entire philosophical system in his name. Later thinkers used him to argue almost the opposite. Everyone finds what they need inside the silence. He controlled nothing, and, in a strange way, everything. Compare this to someone who writes down every thought. A written text fixes a position. It can be refuted, forgotten, superseded. Socrates, by not writing, made himself unrefutable. There's nothing concrete to attack, only interpretation. He chose dialogue over documentation, presence over permanence. He believed that the moment of actual understanding cannot be captured in a text. It can only happen in the room. Maybe the reason we're still talking about him 2,400 years later is not despite his silence. Maybe it's because of it. The man who knew he knew nothing left us everything we needed and nothing we could be certain of, which is, when you think about it, the most Socratic possible outcome. Most of what we inherit was simplified along the way. This channel goes back and looks at what was left out. New video every week. If that matters to you, subscribe.